Approaching New Year, economists in general are keeping their view that Bank Negara Malaysia will raise the overnight policy rate by another 50 basis points to 3.25% in 2023 amid expectation that inflationary pressure will ease. So to discuss this further, joining me this morning is Hann Liew, co-founder and director of RinggitPlus. Good morning, Han.
Morning, Nabila.
All right, the expected OPR increase next month by first half of 2023 is 3.25%, equal to the rate in 2006. And the such increase will be the fifth consecutive time to the level of 3.0% after being at the lowest level of 1.75% before it was raised on May 11th this year. So, is this a good direction, Han?
I think whether it's good or not depends on your viewpoint. If you've been following what the governor of Bank Negara has been saying, she's been very clearly telegraphing what the view is, which is they first need to get back to pre-pandemic OPR, which was 3% before the pandemic. They're not there yet. In August, she said, we will not do it all this year. We might do it a bit next year, which means very gradually and in a measured way, going back up to 3%. And then she also said whether it goes to 3.5 or not after that. So in January, quite certain she's going to 3% from 2.75 today. That takes us back to pandemic level. And whether we then go to 3.25 a few months after that, I think it depends on the data, right? But what's for sure, we're going back to pre-pandemic OPR levels. And everybody who's been following what the Bank Negara governor has been saying will know this already. It doesn't take crystal ball, because she's outright said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it slowly, gradually. So every meeting increased by 25 basis points till we get to 3. And then after that, we'll be following the data, looking at inflation, looking at the economy, and looking at prices.
As mentioned, the rate 3.25 will be like the times before the pandemic. However, the spread of COVID-19 in China and the news of the opening of China's border are worrying the world. So shouldn't it be considered before any monetary policy decision made?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. The thing about China reopening and a new wave for COVID coming from China, we might miss that kind of data point by the time Bank Negara meets on the 18th and 19th of January. So like that's kind of in 2.5 weeks time. I'm pretty sure Bank Negara has all the data they need already, or they're going to get it in the next few days to make that decision in 2 weeks time. So any new data may impact subsequent decisions, but let's just say January 19th is locked on, right? 25 basis points or 0.25% up to 3% is locked on. Whether we go to 3.25 in March, the next meeting in March, I think, like you rightly said, Nabila, depends on data coming out of not just the economy now, I guess, but also in terms of whether there's a new wave coming through the pandemic, which will depress demand. We might end up not going out so much, for example, which then depresses demand, which then reduces the need to increase OPR in March to 3.25, right? So let's just say 3% is pretty much locked in. 3.25 in March, that depends on, like what you said, the data coming out from this new wave.
All right, Han, as we have to face the challenges and issues of global economic uncertainty and potential domestic slowdown in the next year, so what's your forecast for OPR next month? Will inflation ease?
I think OPR goes to 3, but I think you mean, I guess, CPI. November CPI or inflation rate or consumer price index, which tells you what inflation is, came in 4% higher in November versus the year before. I think it drops below 4 by the time January comes around. It's not rocket science. Part of the reason why is 2 reasons. Number one, we got a huge base effect from last year, so big jump last year. Smaller jump this year, which means the year-on-year will be a bit smaller. And number 2, we're starting to see over the last 3 to 4 months easing across the board, easing in terms of input costs. So fuel costs, Brent crude is down 30% over the last 6 months. Even input costs to our food production, things like ammonia, the fertilizer costs have come down again 20-30% in the last 6 months or so since the shock of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And by the time we get to kind of February, March, that kind of shock is already baked in, right? You can't, unless there's another shock, which nobody can predict. Unless that happens, I expect, CPI or inflation to start coming down to the 3 point something percent, January, February, March, before starting to drop down to the 2s, May, June, July, right? So, and then once that happens, there's a lot less pressure on Bank Negara to keep increasing OPR. So I think they're doing the right thing, keeping it measured, keeping it steady, but most importantly, follow the data as it comes through over the next 3 to 6 months.
All right, Han, if you may share, how will all this affect our ringgit performance in the coming months, and what are other factors that can bring big impact to country's economy? Should we look out for that, especially in the near term?
Yep, I think 3 things that will impact the ringgit over the next kind of 6 to 12 months. Number 1 is our economic performance. 2022 is going to be the highest GDP growth in the last 13 years since 2009. This is partly because of the low base effect. 2021 and 2020 a bit lower, so now 2022 has a chance to just go back above 2019 2019 numbers. So over 8% GDP growth, that's going to help the ringgit when we print it in, I would say, early February, when we print out the full year numbers. That's going to be a boost to the ringgit. Second, thoughts around ringgit is political stability, right? If we do have the full budget 2023 passed in February with no problems, it's a good budget. If it's a good budget and it gets passed, no problems, that gives you a signal that, hey, there might be a bit more political stability before the next hurdle, which is the state elections. If that goes through without too much drama, I think there's going to be a lot more demand for ringgit, which then should help ringgit next year. Let's just say 2022 was a very, very tough year for ringgit. Let's see if 2023 will end up better.
All right, thank you so much, Han Liew, co-founder and director of RinggitPlus, for the sharing about OPR lookout for next month.